Hello, this is Robert from Windy Corner TV, and let's say you're in the market for a PlayStation 2 and you want to play Michigan Report from Hell. But which model do I buy? I mean, they all look very similar. I mean, what's the difference? I mean, these look the same. I mean, these look very similar, but there's actually a lot of subtle differences, and I hope to explain them in this video. But before we continue, I should mention one model I don't have, the 10,000, which was only released in Japan. It's very similar to the 30,000, but instead of an expansion bay, you had to buy a separate housing for the hard drive, and it required its own power supply. Anyway, with that out of the way, let's crack on. So, first up we have the 30,000 model. This was the PlayStation 2 that launched internationally in late 2000. We have the memory cards and controller ports. This is a front-loading disc tray. We can twist that, stand on its side. You can put a stand here if you so choose. And we'll twist that back. And on the front here we have the power button. Press once to reset, hold down to power off. The eject button. And if we go to left, we see some USB ports. But what's this curious little thing? That's the iLink connection. This allows you to connect, 6 PS2s for LAN parties. And one game that supported was Gran Turismo 3. If we flip the box over, we see iLink compatible, 1 to 6 players. However, this was later phased out and replaced with the Ethernet adapter. So, now if we turn this thing around, we see a power switch. This is for people who are concerned about idle electricity. And then we have the figure of 8 connection, very standardized. You can buy these all over the place. This is the AV port. It's worth knowing that the component video in later fat PS2s is more noisier. And on the left here is the optical audio port. And this is the gigantic fan. And then we can see these two little holes here. There's one there and there's one there. This is for attaching things like the PS2 screen. Now here we have the expansion bay, and we'll take this off right now. Actually, no, cut. Let's try that again. Okay, so at this point you can now plug in the Ethernet adapter like this. And now you can connect to the internet and do LAN parties with later PS2 games. And we'll take that out. And we can alternatively plug in the hard drive, and it has to be an IDE 3.5 inch hard drive, not a SATA. It has to be IDE. Don't get them confused. And we'll just plug this in awkwardly on camera, and we'll just slide that in like this. And we'll just make sure the connection is firm. And once we're done that, we can tighten these screws, and Bob's your uncle. Next up is the 50,000 model, and on the surface it looks very similar to the 30,000 model, but there's one big difference on the front. The iLink connection is now gone. Poof! Which means you can no longer do LAN in Gran Turismo 3, but you can still use the Ethernet adapter in later releases for LAN parties. But there's also one other big difference, and it's not obvious, but it's right here. It now has an infrared sensor for DVD remotes. Now, in the previous PS2 models, you had to sort of buy a dongle that plugged in the controller ports like this, and it just communicated with the remote. But with the 50,000 model, you don't need it. It's just, instantly point it and you're good to go. I should also mention you can use the standard PS2 controller to play DVDs. Next up is the 70,000 model, or Slim, which is very appropriate because, man, this thing is small. I mean, let's do a comparison with the original 30,000 model. And the reduction of footprint is huge. Even 13 years later, it still amazes me how Sony's engineers managed to cram so much technology into such a small enclosure. Just, man, it still blows my mind. So on the front we have, the familiar I/O, we have the, memory card ports, the controller ports, USB ports. We can now see the infrared sensor, so I'll grab the DVD remote, do a quick demonstration. There you go. Power button here, eject button. It's now a top loader, so that's one less thing to break. No mechanical front loading drive. And we can stand on its side. We can twist that, twist it back. If we look underneath, we can see little holes for the stand. And on the back here, we have the AV port, the optical audio port, and there's now a built-in Ethernet port, which is only really useful for LAN parties since all the online servers are now dead. But you also notice that there's now a external power supply, which has a power brick like this. But it's worth noting this is the only PS2 with a universal power supply, which means you can bring over an American or Japanese PS2 to Australia without a step-up converter and enjoy some imports. Or you can take your PS2 all around the world. It's that simple. And I should also point out these little holes which are used for connecting the PS2 screen. So there's one of them and there's the other. So the screen connects like this. And if it's not obvious, the hard drive does not work with a slim PS2. So that's one advantage in favor of the fat PS2. Now finally, it's time for the 90,000 model, which on the surface looks very similar to the 70,000 model, but there are a few subtle differences. The most obvious one is the big reflective plastic, which allows you to see your handsome reflection. Hey there, gorgeous! What are you doing tonight? So if we look at the front, you can see they've sort of toned down the ridges a bit, and they removed the vent. As you can see here, the vent is gone. And if we look on the top, they've added a vent. And if we also look underneath, there's now an added vent. In fact, the holes are gone, so you have to get a different stand for the 90,000 model. Now, if we look on the back, there's similar I/O, but there's now a built-in power supply. There's no longer an external one, and unfortunately the 90,000 is not universal. So that's 1 point for the 70,000 model, which is universal. Now, as you can see here, the holes are now missing, and they've also moved the I/O bit to the left, so screens for the 70,000 model will not work with the 90,000 model. Ooh, I almost forgot to mention that Metal Gear Solid Special Missions, the PAL version, will not work on a fat PS2 because of a glitch with the weird disc swapping thing, but it works just fine on a slim PS2. So if you want to play that game, get a slim PS2. I should also mention that all PlayStation 2 models can play music CDs, PS1 games, well, except Special Missions, PS2 games, DVDs, but unfortunately none of them will play CDI games. Bad PS2. Now, before we part, I should mention two more models that I unfortunately don't own. The first one is the PSX, which was basically a DVR that allowed you to record TV on a hard drive. There was also one built into a Sony Bravia that was only released in Europe in 2010. Unfortunately, I don't have one, but I would really like one, but I bet shipping would be expensive. Now, I guess that's a wrap. If you guys have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer them. So thanks for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.